زملائي أهلا وسهلا بكم في هذه الجلسة بعنوان
Dear friends and colleagues, we'll be starting this session on shrinking spaces for independent media, in which we will be sharing independent media experiences and their sustainability, whether in their countries or in diaspora. We will be also addressing expression margins that are being shrinking every day and the impact on these experiences. I'm really happy to welcome Mr. Dawood Kuttab, a journalist who has a number of awards and who has been occupying a journalism lecturer at Princeton University, and he's also the Director General of the Community Media Networks. He writes on freedom of expression and Palestinian affairs. I would like also to welcome Ms. Lina Shawaf, a journalist who worked in a number of TVs and radio stations and newspapers since 1992. She established 2 radio stations in Syria, Arabic and music, and she led radio programs. She's also a media advisor with MIS, and she works in training male and female journalists. She established Rosanna Radio from Paris, and she's a human rights defender. She has Reporters Without Borders Award for Freedom of Journalism in 2018. We also have Mr. Omar Al-Jaffal, who's a writer, an Iraqi writer and poet. He has a number of awards. He lives in Berlin, in Germany. He works in the press since 2008, and he contributes to a number of media outlets. He leads today the editing of Jomar website. He's been working as a researcher with the Middle East Center of the London Economy School. Welcome, distinguished guests and speakers. I would start with Mr. Dawood Kuttab, please.
تجيب الفيديوهات من سنوات طويله عند المؤسسين او الناس اللي طلعوا انا كثير مبسوط ان اكون اسلوب الجو كثير مبسوط. صراحه انا يعني شوي اختلف مع العنوان او عن ترتيب العنوان في التضييق الهائل على مساحه التنفس. هنا خرج تضييق بالنسبه للمؤمنين مش حائل بمعنى انه موجود في الدول والجوال، ولكن ما نقدر نسوي اكثر من شيء اشكال. احيانا ممكن يكون يعني بعض الايجابيات من هذا. المشكله الرئيسيه عندنا زي ما حكينا في موضوع الرقابه الذاتيه الموجوده بالاساس بسبب موضوع المنتج الإعلام بعض الدول
لازم تقرب بعد على المايك.
الإعلام بعض الدول نفس الوضع حصل الإعلام ما التلفزيونين الرسميات ملك الحكومة، جريدة رئيسية ملك الحكومة، الإذاعة الرسمية ملك الجيش، ذلك عن السلطة. فعندنا معظم مؤسسات الإعلام الملك مباشر للحكومة أو غير مباشر. حتى معظم الإعلام المستقل يعني النواب الحكومة بمعنى لكنها غير مؤثرة بالمعنى التأثيري.
So there's not much impact on the local community, and that's why the government did not respond to the Human Rights Watch report, because it didn't feel the community pressure. The problem with the media that has an additional 2 problems that are also as significant. First, Journalists Association, that in Jordan it is represented by journalists who work in the media outlets that we said, that whether the government or semi-government. The law considers anybody who's not a member of the Journalists Association is not a journalist. And this is unfortunate because the majority of journalists working in Jordan today are not members of the association. So we, according to the law, we only we represent, or we could be penalized, but yet we continue to work independently. We have Al Balad Radio and Amman Net are very close here, only 2 minutes away from this place at Wadi Sakra. Please visit us if you wish to do so. Regarding journalists, the Jordanian law, I don't know what's the situation in the other countries, any media, news, electronic news outlet should get registered and get a license. And the worst thing about this is the editor-in-chief of any newspaper should be a member of the closed association, journalist association. We have about 15 journalists working at Al Balad Radio, none of whom is a member of the association. We need to find journalists outside who are actually members of the association, so that we can use their names on our website. All of this constitutes a serious problem, but the major thing about the independence of journalism is the environment, the non-appropriate environment for independent media. This necessitates a free environment. If there is no parliament that represents the population or the nation, you would not have, you would never have a free or freedom of press. In addition to the absence of the rule of law, which necessitates that the state deals with all the population equally. However, we find that there is discrimination. Some people are, if the government is happy with certain people or satisfied, they would agree with everything, but with others, they would stop them at the airport. They would put instructions, obstructions to their projects if they're funded by the EU or any other donor, because they think that you are too independent and they're not satisfied with you. This is a serious problem in terms of the independent media and independent government. We have another problem. Even though Jordan was the first country who worked on who signed the open government partnership about government transparency and independent media, radio and TV, and with foreign sponsorship. However, the regulator of the media corporation is a person appointed by the government. So whoever organizes or regulates actually the media should be a group of different parties, male, female. Unfortunately, who regulates the media is only one person who's appointed by the government. Even the last two appointments were without tenders. The prime minister just selected someone and he appointed him. I'm not saying if this is positive or negative, but I believe that the council that regulates the media should represent all the community. All that takes us to a stage where we have about 90% of the journalists who admit in surveys that they practice journalism with self-monitoring, meaning that they select their own path. And this, of course, applies to other media outlets and journalists and about their publications or whatever they want to disseminate. The journalists start to disseminate information outside or publish outside. If you want to know about Syria or Jordan or Algeria, you would be publishing elsewhere, but not in your own homeland. And this is a serious problem. I would finish with the weaknesses after all these, I mean, with the strengths after all these weaknesses. Jordan has taken great steps in terms of the parliament government. We just started to see real and actual work in the establishment of parliaments. However, an actual parliament and true parties without freedom of expression would never bring about democracy. We need for the new parties to be free, to have room for freedom. For the first time, they allow political work in universities, which is positive. However, the political will has not been yet practiced well. There's still shrinking spaces for the journalists. The sky should be the limit, but the narrow mindsets of the government leads us there. Thank you so much. Thanks for ending or concluding with this positive remark. After my, I would come back to you after our other guests speak. Speaking about independent media, I would start with the uh, strengths. If I want to speak about Radio Rosanna, we are considered an independent outlet. If we want to speak about independent media, we can say that it's limited, it has boundaries. If you are independent and you're working in the same country with your own people or colleagues, you cannot be independent as much as long as there are governments who impose certain propagandas or agendas on you. So you have to go outside your country. You need to go abroad and or work from abroad. When you do that, based on the country that you're resorting to, you are still confined with the laws of that country. And therefore, or if you want to speak politics, nobody would approach you. Of course, this also depends on the country that you're residing in. There are states who don't have this margin of freedoms, which we can speak about Europe. There's a higher margin of freedoms, but they are yet they have their own boundaries. And independent media in general, we know that funding the independent media is not similar to the funding by the governments. It's rather simple. It is all its teams are always smaller in size. They can hardly continue and live. As we said, our teams are rather small. As independent media, it's difficult for us. If you have government funding, you would be comfortable. However, you have to be affiliated to a political party, and only then that you have big financing, you would find some sort of support. However, you would not be it would not be independent. When you're in a country, for example, if you're working in a country surrounded by the refugees, or maybe the refugee or the refuge country, you have to, at the end of the day, you're a guest in that country, and somehow there are many things that you cannot speak about in order for you to continue. This is in terms of the content of the independent media. If we go to Europe, for example, you can register in Europe and open your own media outlet and say whatever you want there. There, there is no surveillance on your content or censorship. For example, in any European country, you would register and you would be regulated. You would become a non-profit organization if you want to, for example, get or transfer the salaries of your reporters. You cannot. You are speaking about a European country who has absolute freedom. However, this is the situation. As long as your country is under any list or kinds of sanctions, you would not be able to handle this easily. The bank would tell you you cannot transfer or do any money transactions without justifications. These are one of the obstacles facing the independent media. And I believe much of the independent registered media in Europe faces the same destiny. A non-profit organization was closed down. Syrian one was whose account was closed down in Europe for no reasons or without any justifications. I don't know how such institutions can continue. At least we have a margin to be able to transfer money to our reporters who work at risk. They, their lives are at risk, and you cannot transfer their money or their rights to them, which is another significant challenge. In the previous session, they were talking about the digital marketing. You do have, okay, you have digital marketing. If you come to the merchant, they would tell you, we have, for example, 10 million viewers or followers. You would tell them, I have 10 million. You would say, wow, you have 10 million followers or viewers. They would tell you, are you talking politics? This is the first statement. You would say, no, I am a community media. We experienced this. They would ask, he would tell you, are you speaking women or human rights? We're not interested. So they would consider this as politics. These are some of the challenges that we face. For example, we have 10 million. They would tell you, you should bring more, you should make profit out of this. You have your own income. However, because you have too many listeners or viewers, and this should be an opportunity for you to increase your capital. And this is the main interest of the merchants. They want like entertainment media. So these are the challenges that in addition to that, much of the independent media lost its transparency and reliability. This is an important factor for sustainability, since we still have international organizations who support this voice, which is the voice of independent media, free media. So I believe if it is an actual independent media and they have their own credibility and transparency, I believe only then it would be able to continue to fight in this direction in order for them to continue. Thank you so much, Lina. You talked about connecting or linking the funding with independence. I would move to Omar, please.
So please, Omar, would you share with us your experience? Thank you very much. Lots of things are in common in what happens in the Arab world, everywhere else regarding challenges that we face, but in Iraq. And in the last 30 or 40 years, there's this retreat and regarding free, independent media. What we see, this decline is elsewhere, everywhere in the world is seen. However, what's becoming very clear in 2019 during the Intifada of the October demonstrations, the main slogan was, we need a homeland, or we need our rights. So, and this is when we've seen the atrocity of all the authorities against prominent media organizations. So they were more critical, and also so independent media wasn't able to cover anything in a way as should, maybe because of the shortage of funding, or because we have a shortage in expertise, and we've been taking lots of trainings, but every journalist every journalist will have like 10 or 20 trainings, but when it comes to implementation and the real world, it's a different story. So our main idea here is that we've discovered there's a big gap between the youth, those who aren't represented except in social media. You don't see them in reality. They're not there in the media sphere. They have to create they don't have a voice, a real voice. So this is where this Jumar, this site that supervises the youth and checks how they're performing, and they're the ones who manage and administer this site, whether they're in graphic design, video, and others. So we try to go into and we try as well to bridge the gap, the existing gap. There's lots of unethical performances that take place, like taking a picture of a woman in the street without taking her consent, and other things. So we try our best to also endorse such policies. because actually it is tedious. It's not it's somehow boring, but in such an atmosphere environment like in Iraq, anything can happen anytime. We need to raise the bar of ethics, and we try to and so it's not about politics directly. It's about the social thing. And so it's a different dimension thing, multi-dimension thing. We need to check how do we take our uh, voices. So we need to. We most of us are free journalists, but it's the editors, the external editors, who decide for us. Sometimes, like we write 3,000 words, and then he wants the only 500 to convey as a message to the. So we're not really represented as we wish. We try to play this adventure. We see it as an adventure and see where can we reach. What's nice is that many of this young generation journalists who work with us are directing us to new methods, to basic things in social media, and we also witness and we see the crises that we've neglected, like for instance climate change or other political crisis. So for instance, the climate change nowadays is an important one, and it could not to be overlooked. So there are also economic crises. So independent media in Iraq is not exemplary. Where so there's no funding, there's the censorship, and people think that Iraq is rich and that we're well represented. Actually, no. These are the challenges that we face. At the same time, this young generation who are trying to teach us. This is what we try to do. So thank you for sharing with us the challenges that you face, the daily challenges that is facing Iraq, and maybe it's important how you tackle this social issues and the political dimension. And we'd like to know, are there really social issues that are being isolated from others? So, and if I want to go back to Mr. Dahoud before we open the floor for questions, we'd like to learn from you. What is it that you have? Just give a. Do you have any recommendations or like a brief summary of what can you tell us regarding recommendations? Well, I'd like to tell international organizations and individuals as well. I feel maybe it's a mistake in thinking that any problem is solved by money. And although we're thankful to the funding that we receive, but there are many things that can be solved without money and can even lead to sustainability in our work. And nowadays, we're thinking about independent media. It's mostly digital based, but many issues are can be solved online. So instead of working with 4 or 5 institutions, there are hundreds of media institutions that have small. Each of them have a small impact. So if we have one big one, or do an exchange process between us in Yemen and other institutions in Yemen and other places, if we exchange news, if we do things, we can solve lots of things, and this does not need funding. And also about digital marketing. Digital marketing is based usually on whether the digital platforms that steal data and then they resell them again. 75% of advertisements, the local advertisements that used to come from Jordan, are being stolen and reproduced elsewhere and on different platforms. So So these are like the whales who eat everything. Now, Google and others they try to have a calibration, but it's not always successful. As for self-sufficiency, we as Radio Al Balad, every year we collect 25,000 dinars to uh, uh, to sponsor things. So maybe we need, for instance, we can. Maybe we need to be supported by by solar panels in order not to pay a very big or large electricity bill. This type of support, and so it's always training and training and training is always being repetitive and comes from abroad. We can save money. And my comment that we as independent journalists, we need to communicate together, to correspond with each other, to exchange. And funders need to really support us, not only in money, but in enhancing our performance. We are being spoiled because we receive the funding that sometimes it's not allocated in the right way. But then, and I'm telling you, we Radio Al Balad, we're not being influencers. We don't have any influence, any impact. There are about 100 media sites that do the same. And if 70% or 70 of these 100 sites have worked together, joined their forces, things would be much better. So this is and same goes for Yemen. Yemen, they have lots of things to say, and but if they do collaborate, and if there would be better performance and outcomes. Thank you very much. And actually building partnerships and media platforms would make all the difference if they've followed a different methodology. And yes, donors also should perform or perceive things differently. I will open the floor now for questions and answers. Is there a raised hand here? Would you mind please coming to the mic? Thank you very much. Yes, this is a question to Mr. Dahoud and the other colleagues. I believe that independent media concept needs to be re-identified. Independent, we know that it should be completely independent than the formal media, but in the last 10 years after the Arab Spring and what happened then, we've witnessed lots of media platforms that instigate on and for killing, and they call themselves as independent. And we've seen many media um, uh, uh, institutions that are being managed by businessmen, and they act in very horrendous ways. So we need to re-identify the term independent media, if it's independent, not affiliated with any political party, or is it so the political party and the development of the political movement are one of the outcomes of civil societies. So what we see is even more dangerous that media for militias, affiliated to militias. As for CSOs or the independent media that is not affiliated with governments is facing lots of challenges with agendas of the donors. And we see this in Palestine. There are preconditions that are imposed on Palestinians to get their funding. And so this is also mean it's not going in the independent way. So this is a question for donors and for Mr. Dahoud. Okay, let's independent means independent and not affiliated with the governments and other political affiliation, right? This is, of course, and it does not even have any contact with militias. Well, I'd like to say something about the journalism trust. I don't know how many of you have heard of this journalism trust certificate. It's an important certificate because our capital as independent journalists is our credibility. And when we run like surveys and polls and check with them, we see that they never ask any simple question: which is the most credible media means and tools. This certificate, and we're the first who have acquired this certificate. The journalism trust, word trust, any media institution can fill it and get this certificate of trust. As for the question that there is chaos in or there is misidentification of independent media. And today I checked that the radio station of youth, which is not known, they spend millions and they say like their social broadcast. There is a principle, there's sort of theft in independent media. But I believe those who can judge are the readers, are the audience. And so we need to strengthen this through our collaboration together, through our continuation to work reciprocally. And also, there's another from online, another question that says, Sumaya says, we are in a big Trump. How can we get to this independence under the preconditions that we receive from funders? So this is the main dilemma that we're trying to work on solving. And I don't know if Omar, um, can you please let us know about this? There are organizations that they need to have, of course, their own agendas. And this is the decision at the end of the day when they establish who they want to work through an agenda or not. Well, that was part of our decision that we're not going to work with any entity that imposes its agenda on us. So accordingly, supporting institutions though manage tax money or help others, but there are also others who have their political agendas that they impose on us, and that they and this is a decision for the media entity itself. So the options are there. Well, how much can you, as an Iraqi, experience abroad and also a media in the diaspora? Can you really uh, uh, impose your own agenda on your donors? Well, actually, it's who affiliates with who or who deals with who, and this is how we knock out the doors. It's an application. It's our choice. Some entities we already take the decision that we're not going to approach them, and they oppose our ideology, and others, but others we see that like we think alike. We have lots of commonalities. So and our bar of ethics is similar. So we do work with them. Just another thing, in order not to repeat what I've said earlier, it's we there's a vision, a mission, and values when we talk to media that the whole team should agree on, and this is what we need to work on and endorse. And but in order to be realistic, there are many donors who we think that we need to learn first what is it that we need before approaching them. This is the type of donors that we need to think of the funding. It could be a different funding, and we need to really make sure, is it that we need them to support us or not, because they might impose their agenda on us, or we take the decision beforehand if we see that yes, there are common grounds between us and them. Another question.
Hello, everyone. Assam Ali Muhammad from Yemen. Mr. Dahoud, my question is to Mr. Dahoud. Our problem, I don't know if it's a special one regarding the Arab taste or the local taste. We suffer from the production of a respectful material, however, does not find any likes or followers. Is it a question of taste or awareness, or an Arab follower does not care about any community-related issue that might help the promotion of this community. We notice that the taste of the followers in terms of the youth has deviated far from the actual thing. How do you deal with handle such situation at Radio Al Balad that I could call I might name call as a dilemma? Honestly, this is such a complicated issue to answer. There's no doubt that there are levels, a professional fellowship, laws, and spaces. Sometimes, if a country in a state of war, there would be difficult to have legislations or laws that can be effective. However, the public opinion can play a better role. It could have more impact. And as we said, the levels of impact based on the experiences of the media outlets would be. If there are too many media outlets, there would be that impact would be less. Mainly the digital media outlets. We are lucky in the Arab world. All of us speak one language, one language. In Yemen, you speak one language. So the ideal situation is to unify. If you can't unify the state, at least unify yourself in terms of media. In a project with UNESCO, it's good to exchange the context. To have a report representing 5 radio stations, for example, or broadcasts. So it's important to collaborate. Collaboration, professionalism are both important. They could serve as the basis for our work. There are things that are outside our hands, such as laws, governments, wars, etc. But as professional people, we have hundreds of professionals. For example, in Yemen, you have too many professionals. You don't have to recognize an association. You need to have an assembly or a complex that you can share the information amongst each other. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Qassam Sbeh, journalism student in the American University in Dubai. I see that the idea of independence and objectivity in the media, mainly the Arab media, is not accurate 100%. We can replace this by a parallel or a balanced media, because any donor or any party that supports us does not do this for charity, even though in some cases there are parties who support media outlets, and we see some democracy by these media outlets in criticizing the donor. However, at the end of the day, I see that as a chance to promote or to market unreal democracy. This idea that I have, that you might go into details by answering the following question. Is it true that there are those who accept funding without serving the cultural or political agenda of the donor? Thank you. If you have any previous experiences that you would like to share, would be much appreciated. Thank you. I believe they have already answered this question. I don't know if you wish to add anything. We said there are some doubts that no funding takes place without a certain agenda. I would add that the non-profitable organizations or those who are independent, maybe the independent is not independent 100%, but there's a lot of injustice when we say that there are certain agendas forced. We try to be as transparent as much in terms of content and exporting so many things as bylaws of organizations, but seemingly this is not working well. It seems like it looks like there is some secret organization. Usually, any organization wants to allocate some money to work on the environment, for example, or to do environment awareness. Answering the Yemeni colleagues' question, your question is really a good one. If we do an article or a news report, would be with a lot of effort, and we would say, why doesn't it bring more likes, for example? In the previous session, they addressed an important session, which is the services or the solution journalism. The guest said that the highest number of followers comes from the solution journalism. We learned also at the dispute areas. If I want to refer my content to, we have the humanitarian, when you humanize any content, this would make more interaction and we would bring more followers. We have a question online, a long one, I would cut short, that journalists, even within the independent media, they are selective in terms of selecting their causes or issues. For example, the Palestinian cause is taken collectively compared to other local issues. And that us talk about the desert issue. Why can't you address or tackle the desert issue in the independent media? And actually, the question is about being selective, about selecting the topics. Who would wish to answer this or to comment on this? We have less than 5 minutes. Once again, and answering this question that there are no agendas, you are a human being, you are a journalist, but a human being who has a cause, an opinion, who tries to be objective, independent, and yet you are defending something you believe in. However, it's a duty on a journalist to be objective as much as possible. As individuals and institutions, we would reiterate that there is a message, there's a goal, there are values I work within in my editing line. And it's important also to highlight the climate, which is something universal. It's not for local media. Thank you, Lina. There's some kind of confusion maybe when you say independent or objective. Independence, objectivity, we are not being objective. Objectivity, we can be just, we're not over exaggerating, but the Western concept of objectivity, no, even them, the Westerns are not objective, to be honest. My issue is not with the subjugation or oppression of women. I'm not with the killing of a journalist. I'm not with the occupation of Palestine. This is not my, I don't want to be objective, and I'm not required to be objective. Maybe I shouldn't over exaggerate. I should not be lying to the listener, but I'm not being objective in terms of freedoms or in my concerns. I'm independent from the government. I'm independent from the merchants who try to buy the opinions, but I'm not being objective. So please don't mix both together. Thank you. Please, Mark.
Tom Heineman there, and we are rather surprised by something. We're talking about a shrinking space for independent media. Rosanna did not exist 15 years ago. I would bet you did not exist 15 years ago. Daoud, you have been there since biblical times, so you're an exception. But, you know, we have a lot more independent media now. I'm wondering if the question is it a shrinking impact?
Yes.
Okay, so that raises the question, and I do not have the answer, perhaps you do. What are independent media doing to strengthen relationships with other sectors of civil society who are moving in the same direction? These people can serve as platforms for distribution. Okay, at least in Europe, we've tried the experiment there, it worked. Okay, they can be platforms for distribution. They can be allies who can provide information. They can, tie you into wider movements. I don't know what's happening in this sphere, but I have a feeling that the independent media that survive will be the ones who make these alliances. Is anything going on in this domain?
Thank you, Mark. مين بحب يجاوب؟
I think you're right. The shrinking space is a problem for civil society and includes media. And actually, it requires us to think of freedom of expression outside of journalism. Journalism and journalists are not the only parties to the freedom of expression. We need unions, we need civil society, we need parties, all to be standing up with us and defending our right, because it's their right. We're not speaking just so the journalists are happy. We want the public to be happy. And the public is not only the journalists. So we need to widen and fight against the shrinking space of civil society and media. And yes, we're not effective, for sure.
بدي أقسمها بين لينا
Thank you.
وعمر.
I have one more minute. Lina and Omar. Your question, Mark, is very important. Thank you. Yes, as you said, the independent media is working so hard, making so many efforts to be able. However, its ammunition is the public. Its ammunition is the CSOs who are working on the ground. As I said, we are 10 million listeners. This would make you a bit, you have something to continue with. It's like they're like support. As long as you're talking about their concerns, their services, issues of their concerns, this is significant for sustainability as well. Thank you, Lina. Omar? Our own experience, we try to do a partnerships with the civil society. We can't be isolated on a different island. We have to work together. We try to approach the other parties. We try to meet, to find meeting spaces, to work together in the media and to work together to support them and help them simplify their language in their reporting processes, and also in the risks that they indicate or talk about indirectly. The dilemma of independent media can never be covered with such a short time. Thank you for your interaction. Thank you to the speakers, and I wish you all a good rest of the conference, an exciting one. Thank you.